Welcome back to another episode of the Commander Experience podcast. I am one of your hosts. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jacob. Today we're going to talk about the color blue and go through the pros and cons and what we see as stables and maybe not stables anymore.
Let's break it down. So as a follow-up on our Color Pie series, we're going to talk about blue and break down what we see in our part and in the meta, I guess, and try to make some sense of why blue is so strong, as I think all know that it is. So what do you think, Jacob? Why it seems like when we play Commander that everything revolves around blue, both when you're building and how to win, card draw, etc., etc.
Yeah, I will say that it's probably the one. It is not probably. It is the number one color that I'm looking for when I'm going in for a new build. So a lot of the time, if I have an idea of something I want to build, I kind of look for Commander that includes blue, just because it smooths everything out. So one of the big pros that I see for blue is basically the number one most important thing: drawing cards. So no matter what kind of strategy I'm trying to run, I want to draw as many cards as possible to make it easier to do that strategy and make it easier to play less cards that are, just play the best cards and draw them every game.
Yeah, and from my point of view, because I do think that most people will think it's obvious when you talk blue that we are talking about card draw and we talk about counter spells and cards of that category. But what I also think is perhaps a little bit overlooked is that it contains some of the best cards in other categories. So either if you talk blink, milling, self-milling maybe, proliferating, blue has access to all sort of tools that you don't see many other colors have. I think they're much more flexible in what they do. It does have some blind spots, of course. All colors do. I just think they're much less in blue, and you usually play blue with other colors, meaning that the other colors can make up for what you're missing in blue.
Exactly, and I think like the number one thing, which is maybe also obvious, but I think this is like the best thing about blue is that blue's, let's call it removal counterspells, is like the only kind of removal that doubles as protection for you winning. So it's a removal spell in the sense that it can stop someone from winning, but it can also be used defensively. And I think that's number one most important thing in the game, especially in bracket 4 and 5, because you want to be able to your removal to do two things, and here it does the best thing on top of being removable. It helps you win the game as well.
Also think that in more recent time, when I say more recent times, I'm talking within the last 2 or 3 years, we see more and more cards being printed that helps you winning the game also. We've seen cards like Displacer Kitten and Hullbreaker Horror, that both of them are enabling infinite combos. And we already had the Lab Maniac, and they also printed Thassa's Oracle some years ago now. It seems like they just keep supporting blue in so many ways.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, because I think that was one of the big downsides for blue back in the day. You had all these upsides, but it was kind of hard winning in blue, so you had to add other colors of that. But like Hullbreaker is one of the most efficient cards to do that now, because it's just a single card that probably combos with your mana rocks.
Yeah, it's uncountable and it has flash.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's, as you said before, it's best in class in a lot of things, like at least close to like top deck manipulation, blink, evasive stuff, proliferation. Yeah, artifacts, combos as well, and mill. So yeah, a lot of things where they are close to being best in class or best in class. So.
And you can also say that some of the cons that blues have, like artifact and enchantment removal, board wipes, low board presence, all of these cons that we're seeing that blue struggles with, they can get from other colors, especially when you play bracket 4 and above. Most of the time you're playing at least 2 colors, and in many cases I think you're playing 3+. So it's not an issue. You're just gonna cover your bases with the other colors.
Yeah, and on top of that, some of the things you talked about here, but also they're kind of bad at removing permanents, have a hard time handling like what in classic Magic you will call aggro, and that's not really a thing in Commander, especially in bracket 4 and 5. So a lot of the things that blue is bad at is not something you see in our bracket. We have talked about in length, how board wipes is pretty bad. So blue not having board wipes is maybe not a problem. So yeah, and low board presence, not too bad either, because there is other people for people to hit on the face. So maybe you're not getting hit as well. So I think it's like a real combo of the pros is what you really want to do, and the cons is stuff that maybe isn't too important in Commander.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked when we talked about white, and I think we should do so here also, talked about if we see blue as a main color or a support color. So I think it's no surprise when we both say it's a main color in Magic.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because it ends up being a main color. I think it's because of a lot of these staples. In some ways, it's supporting the other color to do the thing, but yeah, there's just so many good blue cards and you want them all. So it ended up being, at least in my decks, like 50% of most of my decks, even in 3 and 4 color.
I also just quickly went over my decks before we started recording, and all my decks containing blue, whether it's 2 or 3 colored decks, the biggest presence in those decks are blue.
Yeah, same.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about some of the staples we see in blue and the cards that we see the most in bracket 4 at our table. The cards we see the most are, of course, Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora. It seems like when you're building blue, like Soul Ring, these are just 2 of the first cards you're putting in your deck.
Pretty much. We joke about if you see a Rhystic Study and it gets to do the thing, that's probably the card that wins the game. So if a 3-mana card kind of wins you the game, that's probably pretty good.
Also, talking about blue, all the counter magic, we have cards like Force of Will and Force of Negation that are free. We also see a lot of Fierce Guardianships, of course, and Swan Song, Flusterstorm, and we also tend to see quite a bit of Mindbreak Trap these days. We have seen that more and more in our pod over the last year, I would say. And we even see some Pact of Negation stills in decks that can swing paying for that if they need to.
I will say that I think that in bracket 4, counter spells is a bit more interesting because we do see a lot of creatures that is very important for the game still in our bracket. So you can't just play all the non-creature counter spells and hope to win that way. That's a pretty bad strategy, so you'll be punished pretty hard for that. So it's a bit different than higher brackets. So.
But if we move on to the next category of blue stables, they tend to cover that base, and that is some of the stables that are handling creatures and maybe even permanents. And in this case, we're specifically thinking about Into the Floodmaw and Submerge. 2 cards that does a lot of work for almost no mana. Submerge will be free most of the time, and Into the Floodmaw is a single mana for bouncing any given permanent or creature. I think the fish that you're giving when you're bouncing a permanent is worth it. I think I bounced a Smothering Tide for 1 mana in his end step last week, and he never got to cast that Smothering Tide again because casting it on his next turn would mean that would be his whole turn again, and he would just get too far behind. So he had to do other stuff in order to try and stay in the game.
Yeah, that's like, I think this is one of the categories where I think we can really see that power level has risen over the years, because I remember the days where bouncing something wasn't good because they can just play it again. But that's not really a thing anymore. If you bounce a 4-mana permanent, the game will probably either be over or it's too late for him to cast it again. So it kind of acts as permanent removal. So it
is. But I do think that the brackets have something to say with that, meaning that, as you said, it's a timing thing and not a power issue. So when the games finish as fast as they do, using 8 mana to cast Smothering Tide is just not something you have the luxury to do.
Exactly. So next up, in the same vein, is Cyclonic Rift, so also a bounce spell that also can be mass removal and, importantly, instant speed. So I think this is one of the cards that we have discussed a bit, actually, because 7 mana is very rough at this point in our pod. But I think we at most of the time we agree that 7 mana and you probably win the game is still good enough. So we still see this as a very big staple, and in some decks it can be the win con that you need to really, if you have the game taken over but you're not really won, this can be the card that just ends it.
And I also think it has shifted a bit, meaning that when we started playing 7 years ago, when you cast Cyclonic Rift, you almost exclusively casted it for the Overlord cost, where now we see a lot more of it being cast for only the 2, just bouncing a single permanent. I would say it's almost like 50-50, if not even more to the side of just casting it for 2, because it's more relevant and it's more up to our speed. So when we started playing it, it was the Overload use that made us put it in the deck, and maybe sometimes we would cast it for 2. Now it's the other way around, I think. Now it's like a side thing that in rare cases you can cast it for the overload.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of see it. I don't know if it's a weird comparison, but I kind of see it as Finale of Devastation. I use it in the same way, where early game it can be like tempo, find some piece with that card, or remove some piece with it. And late game it can be the win con. It scales well, basically.
Yeah, because like we talked about with Into the Flood more, if I have 2 mana open and somebody plays a Smothering Tide, I'm bouncing that Smothering Tide. I'm not waiting to overload it.
No.
Next one we have on our stable list is Clone Magic. One other thing that Blue is exceptional at, the most obvious one being Phantasmal Image and Flesh Duplicate, that you can also use for winning the games in some combos. But of course you also have all the 4 mana ones. You have the Sakashimas and cards like that. So I know you're a big fan of clones. You even built a few decks surrounding this.
Yeah, I love clones. I think especially when the power level has risen, and creatures especially, not only in our pod, but creature power level in general in Magic has risen. The clones kind of get buffed as well. So that's pretty interesting. And yeah, when the power level in bracket 4, basically every creature people play is usually pretty powerful. So worst case scenario, you're kind of cloning a Gilded Drake or Fairy Mastermind or something like that, and it's still on rate, so I can't really complain. I think clones are very strong.
Yeah, we even got the new Mockingbird last year, I think it was. Yeah, just being able to clone a Esper Sentinel or something like that for just 1 mana is pretty powerful. They're also sort of the reason that I've considered more and more if I'm putting Orcish Bowmasters into my deck or not, because when Orcish Bowmaster got printed, I just slammed it into all my decks because, hey, we are punishing that people are drawing cards, which I thought was awesome. But with all the clones we're seeing at our table, playing an Orcish Bowmaster usually means that somebody plays a clone and shoots your Bowmaster. And now the table has turned. Clones are doing so much work in a high stake meta, I think.
Yeah, even after Dockside got banned some time ago, so still very good. Yeah, next up we have some of the things that you probably want to clone. So Gilded Drake, as I mentioned before, and Volta Stormdrake. So removal that also steals the thing. And I think where we really see this is very strong is like stealing a Drannith. So you can want to remove the stacks piece, you want to have it on your side. So the more one-sided stacks pieces they print, the better these cards get. And it seems like they're going down that road. So yeah, also removal. Of course, there's a downside, them being sorcery speed, but yeah, very powerful still.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier regarding non-creature counter spells. And these sort of makes up for it if you somehow are running a mono blue deck or something like that, or heavy blue. You have these sort of tools in your toolbox when you're playing blue. So yeah, you may be not running that many counter spells that can counter any spell, but you have Gilded Drake and Volatile Stormdrake that can just steal commanders, or like you said, stacks pieces when necessary.
Yeah, and the hidden mode where you play against a reanimate deck that reanimates something stupid on turn 2 and you just steal it and win the game on the back of their reanimation spells. So they have that like big swing possibility as well.
And talking about creatures you might want to clone, we have all the card drawing creatures. We have Ledger Shredder, which may or may not be a card drawing creature, but it's doing its work very good. So Ledger Shredder, and we have Fairy Mastermind, of course. We have Polywalk that fits into some decks. We found out that it's not a stable maybe, but only in certain decks. But the decks that wants this card really wants it. And we do tend to play a very low mana curve in bracket 4, so it will draw you some cards. We are seeing more and more Ghostly Pilferers in our part, I think. Both for the free discard outlets that can enable our commanders. We have a friend in our part that is playing a Zephyrus deck, where he uses this for the free discard outlet. I'm also using it in my Green Goblin deck for the same reasons, and it's still drawing you cards whenever people are casting their commanders or from anywhere else, and this happens more than one should think it does. Just the Jesk's Will and casting from the graveyard, stuff like that, it triggers more than one should think it does, and it usually ends up drawing you 4, 5, 6 cards through a game if you get it out early, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the new, I'll probably call this the poster child. I didn't think we would see anything stronger than we had, but One tongue. What a what a magic card! Jesus Christ!
Yeah,
I didn't know what to say.
what do we have in blue that we can maybe push a bit further?
Yeah,
Let's think.
insane.
Let's think Naruto, and then just pull it back just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This card has drawn so many cards, and we've seen multiple times as well that people, because we see more and more big mana decks, people's like, I guess I'll put 8 mana into it, and suddenly they draw 4 cards, and it's also big and hits people in the face and draw them cards and everything. It's pretty insane. It's definitely the best one, I think, at this point.
I casted myself for the first time last week for more than the 2 mana. I was playing my Helga deck, a game I ended up winning, by the way. But I was casting it for 6 mana, I think. X was 4, something like that. So now I was drawing the 2 cards, but because of Helga, I was also drawing a card from Helga. So of course, it's a more perfect fit in that deck in so many others, but it just did so much work. And now I had a blocker as well. That was a 4/4 by the time. So yeah. So clones are good, and if not for the reason we mentioned, for so many other reasons.
Yeah, and I think this category is, besides Mystic Study and Mystic Roar, this is the category that I add first in my blue decks. I want to draw cards so I can play the fun cards. So.
And we talked about One Tongue in our Avatar episode, and I think you said this, which I think is a very good point, because of course we compared it to Archivist of Ogma in white that does pretty much the same. But as you said, you can pitch this to Force of Will or Force of Negation, which actually can end up mattering. So if it wasn't already good enough compared to Archivist of Ogma, it definitely is now.
Yeah.
And if we should just close up the whole card drawing category, a staple we see a lot in our part is Frantic Search, because it's pretty much free and it's card selection. It just does so much work. People trying to win or whatever they're doing, you can just cast Frantic Search, look at a bit more cards, untap your lands. And if you have some sort of reduction, of course I'm playing this in Green Goblin, so I'm making mana by casting this, but you don't even need that for this card to be good. I just think it does so much work in any given situation.
Yeah, very cool card. I love it. As you know, I love copy decks. I have copied this many times, and now we see more guys cradle. This is even more enabling to that deck. So yeah, next up we have I don't know if it's a new category, but it feels kind of new to us at least. We have Flash Enablers. So I think we always wanted to use some of the old Flash Enablers, but it just wasn't strong enough. So they printed a lot of new ones. So here we talk about Valley Floodcaller, High Fate Trickster, which we see a lot actually, and Born Upon the Wind, which is probably the most versatile one. Yeah, as the power level rose, we have seen that trying to win first is maybe not the best idea. So trying to win on top of someone else trying to win is probably pretty good. And that's what these cards do. And then you can also, of course, abuse Seedborn Muse and all this. So
yeah, and there are even a few infinite combos with Valley Floodcaller that did not attend for. So then we have, in my opinion, some of the best tutors in the game, and that's Intuition and Gifts Ungiven. And I just think that these cards are like, they don't even have a downside. It's upside with upside in most of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of the only tutors that can find the whole combo for 3 mana. It's pretty crazy what they do. And also instant speed as well on top of that, just to make sure it's broken.
Yeah. And if you're playing white, you're just finding Sevin's Reclamation along with the 2 combos pieces you need, whether it's, I don't know, Food Chain or Underworld Breach or whatever it may be. You just use this and select Sevin Reclamation. Now you can cast them from the graveyard. So
yeah, and we haven't even seen them that much in our pod. I think these 2 cards are actually kind of underrepresented, because there's also Dread Return stuff that we don't do in our pod, and there's lots of possibilities. We don't see it much, but it's very powerful.
And last but not least, we have some blue stables that we think are stables. Maybe not for all decks. It kind of depends. But of course, Consecrated Sphinx, when we are talking card draw. I'm not myself playing Consecrated Sphinx in all my blue decks, but I do play it in the decks I think makes sense. And we have Jinkataxias and Omniscience. These are cards that I would still call stables, because we see them on a fairly regular basis at our table.
For me, this is kind of a big pot. Like, Expropriate is kind of in the same pot, maybe not as powerful, but it's just to like say that blue also has some big bombs that kind of end the game without ending the game. But if they get to stick, you probably win the game. So blue can do that as well.
Yeah, and as we talked about in the beginning of the episode, the flexibility that blue has is of course also having access to all the extra turn spells. But that was some of the staples we see at our table. Of course, we are talking blue. There are much more. These are just the one on top of our heads that makes the most sense to just quickly talk about here. But if we should just talk a little bit about what we don't see at our table, blue cards that are maybe good enough to be played more, what could some of those be, do you think?
I think the first one that came to my mind, and that's because I'm following CDH quite a bit as well, just watching what they're doing, is Hydroelectric Specimen. And I think it might just be laziness that we haven't added this to our decks, because it's such a little edge, but I think it is an edge that's worth running. So yeah, 3 mana or 3 life, so say that for a land that enters untapped, and then in some very niche cases, it can help protect your wins or stop someone from winning. So I think it's just a land with upside, and it should probably be in most decks. It's kind of hard if you play 3+ colors, maybe, depending on your... And that's probably what's stopping it a bit, but I think if you play two colors and below, it should just be also include.
Yeah, I remember we talked about this a few weeks back when I was building my Katara Waterbending Master, because that's a mono blue deck, and in that deck it makes a bit extra sense to put in, and since then I also put it in my Emery deck. But I remember us talking about it because you weren't that big of a fan, because as you mentioned back then, we are already running Sink into Stupor, and it kind of does the same thing. So are you now supposed to run 2 mono blue lands in a 3+ colored deck? So if you had to cut your losses and only run one of them, Sink into Stupor just does more. So that's the card I think we've chosen, because I do think when we are building our decks, we tend to run a much lower land count. In some cases, 30, 32 lands. So putting in 2 mono blue lands in a 3-color deck is an expensive cost to have access to this sort of ability, I think. So that is the thought process you have to go through when choosing these cards, I think. And I think that's the reason we haven't seen it more, to be honest.
Yeah, you're probably right. Just when you see the card, you're like, why am I not playing this? And kind of forget about the whole land-based thing, because as you say, if I play 3 colors and I'm around 30 lands now, maybe 32, after my fetches and shocks and duels, there's kind of no space left, especially because I have a tendency to include some basics because we see Blood Moon and stuff like that, and then there's kind of no spots left for stuff like this. So
yeah, and also if you're in a deck where you're running green, you're also running Beseiju, which is a mono green land.
Yeah.
And then you're maybe even also running like Yavimaya or something like that. You're running all these utility cards, and it's sort of, where does that end? So you don't mana screw or color screw yourself. You have to make some sort of decisions, because when you run that few lands, most of the time you will end up having them in your opening hand, and you just don't have your colors, so you have to mulligan.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's good enough, and I am running it in 2 decks. And I think if you're running a 3+ color deck where you're very invested into blue, you could swing it. But I do think it's one of those cards where you have to question mark it if you have enough good lands that can make sure you have your colors when you're starting the game.
Yeah, definitely. The next 2, I think we kind of bundle them. It's Insight and Psychic Possession, so 2 card draw spells. I think both of us have tried this card before. I have tried Insight a lot, actually, a couple of times. They feel so close. If they were any other color than blue, I think they'll basically be a super stable. It's just that they're getting overshadowed by all the other card draw spells in blue.
Yeah. I do think that Psychic Possession is closer to our meta than Insight is.
Yeah, probably.
Because we are drawing so many cards, and usually by turn 3, you know which one of your opponents is gonna draw all these cards. For so many reasons, I think this could be a stable. We're in a Ristic Study meta, I think. So this is just an extra Ristic Study. And I also think that the reason that we don't see it is that, and we're going to talk about these cards a little bit later also, but we already see cards like Steel Enchantment and Mirror Maid, which are 2 and 3 mana for the Ristic studies. So I do think it's why they don't make the cut, because I do think they are very good cards. It's just the mana thing. It's just 4 mana is so much, but I do think they do so much work, and I think you could play especially Psychic Possession without ever being really sad about it. But 4 mana is a lot.
Yeah, Mirror Maid was in my head all the time. Like, Mirror Maid does the same, just better in every way. So, and that's one of the cards that we are seeing a lot more.
Yeah, what Psychic Possession does is a bit more work though, because Mirror Maid will only copy the Ristic study, and in many cases that would be good enough. But you're also drawing for the wheels they're casting, or the Esper Sentinel they also have, or etc., etc. And you also draw for their draw step because you're missing your own draw step. So especially if you play decks where you want to be drawing cards on other people's turn, I think this is one of the first cards you would look at.
Yeah, true. When I'm thinking about this card, this sounds like such a fun card to build around in Breaker 3. Trying to make a deck that just Psychic Possession and copy it and wheel and doing all sorts of weird things to make your opponent draw cards. But yeah, so close, I think. But for me, not close enough.
Yeah, it's kind of fun that we're talking about these cards we don't see and maybe are good enough, because we've seen both cards in our meta. Not so much the past couple of years, but we've seen them before, and it's never been like they didn't do work and we thought they were bad. I just think that it's a mana issue and it's a timing issue, because casting Psychic Possession and past turn doesn't feel that great, but it's not that different from casting Smothering Tide and passing turn, I think.
No, not at all. And as we said earlier, Ristic Study kind of wins the game in so many ways. So having an extra card that does that sounds pretty good. So yeah, it's interesting. I think we'll see them again at some time. Someone will try them out again.
Agree. Next on the list is actually a card I also see they're playing in CDH, so it's probably good enough when they're playing it in CDH, but it's Dress Down. And I do think one of the biggest upside we were talking about in our 2026 episode, we were talking about some of the things we would change if we could, was adding cantrips to some cards, especially when you're countering your opponent or removing something, because you're doing 2 other players a favor as well. So if it's a big downside sometimes to be countering one of your opponents and not the 2 others. So putting on a cantrip on a card would help would help that player investing in those sort of cards. And Dress Down does exactly that. And I also think when we talked about Born Upon a Wind, it's what really pushes those cards over the edge of being playable to being very good, because the thing that it replaces itself is no small feat, I think. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think that part is very powerful. And that's also why probably should be played more, especially because we see more big mana stuff recently. And I think big mana, they still want to have some removal or ways to interact with the game, but it's kind of hard for them to do. And stuff that also cantrips is so good for those kind of decks, because they can just fire it off at some random turn if they have the extra mana lying around to draw the card and don't really care. So I think we're going to see this card more, also because we see more and more Drannith, and this is very good against the Drannith.
Yeah, and it's one of those cards where you read it and you're thinking, oh, okay, you can stop your opponents most of the time. But it's also doing other work, meaning that it can, for 1 turn, neutralize a Drannith Magistrate, let's say, because it only hurts the creatures that are in play. So you can Dress Down. Now you can cast your commander because Drannith Magistrate has lost all its abilities. But when your commander comes in, it hasn't lost all its abilities. So now you have full access to your commander. So you can use it in many ways. And I mean, the flaw is that it's 2 mana instant that draws your card, that cantrips itself. So in worst case scenario, you can just cycle this and see if you get the card you need.
Yeah. And most of the time, you can probably cast it at some inconvenient time for your opponent, so they don't get some sort of value on top of the card you're drawing. So I think it's one of those cards that feels like, I don't know, a vegetable. You should probably eat it, but it's kind of boring to put into your deck, so you don't do it. And I think when the power keeps rising, we will see more people add it, because to follow the power level, you need to add those kind of cards.
Yeah, I have it in my Muldrotha deck now, and I also have it in my Go Shintai deck. So I have started to put it in decks, but only in the decks where I think that makes the most sense. And I think you can just put this in any blue deck. And talking about it just now, I'm sitting here thinking I should probably just put this into my Katara deck.
Probably, yeah. It seems if you're playing 2 colors and below, I think it's just auto-include. So next up, cards we actually kind of mentioned before in the previous category, so we'll just quickly talk about them. I have been trying out for some time to play all the 5 mana extra turns and find them pretty good. Like late game, they are big bombs, and early game, they kind of give you an extra land drop for 5 mana without costing you anything.
And drawing a card.
So that's, and drawing a card. So it's kind of like 5 mana, play a land, and no other downside. Zero mana because you get to untap. So kind of 0 mana, play an extra land. And then not all the other stuff that's on top. So it scales really well with the game as well.
It does. We talked a lot about extra turn spells and whether just to play them in all blue decks. So we won't go too deep into that here. But I think you can always just play extra turn spells and be happy about it.
I will say the ones that target, be careful out there. It's dangerous. Maybe don't play the one that target.
Especially with the new redirect lightning. We already have the deflecting sword, of course. But redirect lightning also just hit the meta.
So next up, mental misstep. I'm still on the fence on this one. I have seen you have played it a bit.
Yeah, but I'm also the only one in the pod that's actually playing 2 mono blue decks. And I do think when you're playing mono blue, it's easier to put these in. But also, like I said before, we are kind of in the Ristic Study meta. And I do think that countering Mystic Remora, I actually did it last week. So it's actually happening. Mental misstepping, Mystic Remora, turn 1 is just such a setback, because not only are they going to miss the card draws, but many people are choosing their hand because they have Mystic Remora in hand. They maybe even only have 1 land in hand, and they're going to play that land, cast Mystic Remora, and expect to be drawing cards and finding the next couple of lands. So I know I set our friend back quite a bit in that game, countering his Mystic Remora, and he was pretty much out of the game for just 0 mana and 2 life, and I hadn't even played a land for turn yet. So that was, I think it's powerful. Definitely. And I do play them in more decks than you do. I do also play them outside the mono blue decks. I play it in my Green Goblin deck, I think. So I do play it in general. So this is where we differ quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, I would say I would any day trade my hand to a 6-card hand if I just started with this as well in my hand. Because I think it will always have a target. It's literally just a scaling issue. It feels bad to draw late. But early game, I would love to have this in my hand every game. It's so powerful.
Yeah, and I think where it gets really strong is some of the best counter spells, like Swan Song, is 1 mana. We also see quite a bit an offer you can't refuse. So in many cases, you're protecting your win con or whatever it is with a Fierce Guardianship. Now they're trying to Swan Song it, and now you can just mental misstep it for 0 mana. So you have cast 2 counter spells for 0 mana. I think that alone is good enough with what we talked about before to put it into your decks. I think this is a staple, to be honest, because we don't see it as much as we did the others. We put it in this category, but I think this very well could be considered a staple.
Yeah, we'll probably never be sad to cast it, at least, if you have a target.
Next on the list, I actually think this is a card I've been advocating back in the day, and I think I'm one of those that have cast this card the most. I also chose to cut it when Mana Crypt got banned, because I did think that did quite a difference regarding playing this or not, but it's Thieving Skydiver.
Yeah. I have tried it a bit. I never really got on board, and I will probably agree with you that now it's worse than I thought it was before. I think it's for me, it's one of those cards. It's so close, but not really there yet.
I think what's underrated is how much fast mana we are playing in Bracket 4. I always think if you're casting this turn 2, it will have 1 target, whether it's a Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Soul Ring, or whatever it is. I think you will always have a target. So probably, it's a free mana ramp, but you're also stealing from your opponent. You're also negating one of your opponent's mana that they maybe need to be casting the Ristic Study turn 2 or whatever it is. And I do think that's the powerful part, because I do think that free mana is the reason we don't play, because free mana turn 2 or turn 3 is just too much to play that and say go. And that's without even talking about you have a 2-1 flying blocker, which I also think is pretty decent when we're talking about Ragavan or whatever you have at the table. where you might want to block, because as soon as it hits the battlefield, the job is done. You don't need it anymore. So now you just have a 2-1 blocker. I think it's very close. And I could see myself putting it back into decks, especially my mono blue decks, because as many know, ramp is one of those things you don't have too much of in mono blue. And I do think that this is sort of an under the radar hidden ramp piece in blue that people don't think about. And it is ramping you.
Yeah. I think in mono blue it should be good enough. I feel like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I feel like the Revi is like the perfect home for this card, and I don't even play it in that deck. So that's why I'm kind of struggling. And maybe I should, but I don't know. I haven't really felt good about playing it yet.
Yeah,
but
the Revi would make a lot of sense, also because you want to be hitting people, and it is a flyer. So I would be playing this in the Revi.
Yeah, true. Maybe I should try it out in the Revi. It sounds good. I think I actually had it when I started out playing the Revi, and I took it out for, I don't know, something else.
Next on the list is also a card that I probably have played the most at the table, and every week when I'm looking at my decks, I'm still considering putting this into some decks, and that's Stifle. I just love that card. I can't help it, and I'm probably putting it back into some decks. But the realization always hits you when I'm putting this back into the deck, and that is, what am I taking out? Because you're not taking your Force of Will and Force of Negation and Fierce Guardianship or even Mental Misstep. You're not taking those cards out. So what it is replacing, and that's the big question, and I think that's why it doesn't have a place anymore. But every time I've cast a Stifle at our table, I've been happy about it. And I've even countered 2 ultimates on a Planeswalker with it, where one of them was a Liliana Dreadhawk General ultimate. So I've used this to great satisfaction, and still I'm not running it anymore, and I don't know why. I've countered a fetch land turn 1, so he didn't get the land, and he had the Mystic Remora in hand. and like we talked about before, he only had that one land in hand, so it was like game over for him almost. I just think it has so much utility, and even there's so many decks. There's your Tie-Em deck. There's so many decks where you can just stifle the trigger, and that is enough to stop them winning the game. I do think this is underplayed, and I do think this has place in Bracket 4, to be honest.
And my crazy opinion, so maybe don't listen to me, is Wizards, please create a 0 mana 1. Maybe it also draws a card.
Would you play, we talked about this before, would you play Stifle if it cantripped?
Yeah, I would. A 1 mana 1 that cantripped as well, I would play. Definitely. I think that's good enough.
Would you play a Tails End with a cantrip?
Probably. I'm not sure.
We just talked about Dress Down, and like we said, the floor is cantripping for 2 mana.
Yeah, I can't remember if Tails End need to target anything, or you can just cast it into anything.
It's a legendary permanent or activated or triggered ability.
Okay, so there needs to be a target. I think that's kind of the issue compared to Dress Down. It's very close, though, I would say. I don't know if it would be too broken.
It first got on my radar, by the way, when I was playing my Muldrotha, because at some point in time, people really ramped up the graveyard hate. And what Stifle did was also protect my graveyard, so it could stifle both Bajuka Bog or whatever artifact graveyard hate that had a triggered ability or activated ability that could exile my graveyard. So it has a lot of applications. Like anything else in blue, it has great applications to more than just the most obvious things. So what Stifle also can do that the counterspells can't do, and I think this is an important one, it can actually handle Boseiju and Otawara.
True.
I think it has a lot of utility. And to be honest, I don't think you would ever be sad. Like I said, I played it with great satisfaction and success. The hard part in Bracket 4 is just what it is replacing, I think. Not if it's good enough, because I do think it's good enough.
I want to play it. Wizards, please make a better one. Next up, we have a card I think we both wanted to play at some point. It's Filter Out. And I think a lot of people are actually hyped about this card. I don't know if I have too much to say other than I think it's good. I maybe have just been too lazy to put it into my deck, so try it out. I really want to play it in some deck that plays 1,000 artifacts and reduce their cost and cast it and play them again and use it as a combo piece as well as a removal piece. I think that's like the real home of it. Yeah,
but that's also kind of the easy answer, I think. If you build around it, then it's good. But yeah, I do think it's generically good because all of us is playing the fast mana. And yes, you're bouncing your own fast mana, but if you're bouncing 3 opponents' fast mana, instant speed. You're hitting 3 people. And yes, you're hurting yourself also a little bit in this case. But now you also have the option of having an answer to all the enchantment strategies, and you have your Karth deck. I know this is a rare occasion where you see a Super Friends deck in bracket 4, but you do have the occasion of having some of these permanents that you don't usually have an answer to, and now you can do something about that. You have your Sur deck, which is really annoying, and this is the perfect answer for your Sur deck.
Yeah, it being instant speed kind of can do the same as a Clonic Rift in some situations. I think it needs to be tried out more.
I'm pondering to put it into my Helga deck at the moment, but I'm already running Avatar's Wrath in that deck. Not that it at all does the same, but I'm not sure how many cards I can fit into the deck that are not creatures. That's the issue. But this is a creature-heavy strategy, and that's why I'm thinking about putting Filter out in the deck, because I'm already running all these mana dogs that don't get bounced. I do run the Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, all the 0 mana one that can help me cast Helga on turn 2. But as soon as I've cast Helga, I don't really care about those, because I will have so much mana that the mana rocks doesn't really matter. And now I have the answer to bouncing Ristic Studies and Smothering Tides and those kind of permanents in general. So
yeah,
if it finds a way, I will try it in Helga. I do think that would be my place to try it out first and see what it does.
Yeah, I think interesting. I'm looking forward to see it some decks. Maybe I should also try it somewhere. I thought about it in Glab for a second, but for some reason I wanted to be 4 mana in that deck. But yeah.
Yeah, and of course, as you said before, if you can exploit it somehow. In my Green Goblin deck, I'm running the Paradoxical Outcome, where you bounce all artifacts, I think it is. But now you also draw cards, which is why this is so much better than Filter Out. But I think you could also just add Filter Out to that deck, because now it's cost blue, but you will bounce your mana rocks and can play them again. So if you're running any sort of those cards, and you also talked about, if you run the creature that gives discount to artifacts, this would also be great, because you can probably play all your artifacts for 0 anyway.
Yeah, it's just mana positive at that point. Especially if you have like Useless or something like that, it also draws you a lot of cards. So I think it has some uses, and we should see it more. So next up, we have a card we have discussed that as well internally here. It's Nissahall. I think it's, as we said earlier, Ristic Study wins games, so Nissahall probably wins even more games. It's just getting it on board. We don't really see it even in reanimation decks and stuff like that. I think it's, if this card is on the field, you're probably winning that game, and that should probably make it a stable in some sort of way. Yeah,
we saw it back in the day in our part, when we played closer to bracket 3. We had a bit more time. Now spending 7 mana to maybe draw 3 or 4 cards, 5 cards on the next turn cycle. When are you going to do this is the issue.
Yeah.
What I'm doing a lot now, which I did back then when I built decks, was thinking about where in the game I was hoping to cast this, and in how many games is it doing work where it helps me win, and in how many games is this just too late and doesn't do what I'm hoping it to do. And I do think that Nissahall is falling into the category where if you cast it and winning from this, you're probably already winning that game. And in the other cases, it doesn't do any work. It's too late. It does so much work. And I do think that if you're running a Reanimator strategy, that this is going in alongside with Consecrated Sphinx and Jin-Gitaxias and the other creatures. But even in that case, let's say you're entombing a creature to the graveyard to reanimate. I think you're doing that with Consecrated Sphinx before you do this with Nissahall, I think. So, and I also think that's one of the hurdles it runs into, that even in those kind of strategy, it's not tier 1.
Yeah, that's probably right. It's kind of interesting.
It's such a good card also because it protects itself. I have wanted you to run this in your Mercel deck, because you could use the ability with Mercel, but you never did.
I actually put it in, I think, last time we ordered some cards. So
okay.
I just haven't played the deck. It's interesting. I think it's also because I'm kind of Gaia's Cradle pilled at the point. Right now, I'm just playing so much Gaia's Cradle, so in most games I play, I have like 20 mana, I don't know what to do with it, please give me an outlet, and Nissahall is just, whatever, it's 7 mana, whatever, I usually have 500 mana, so what does it matter? But it's easier just to win the game probably at that point, so that's probably the big issue.
We had the whole discussion regarding cards like Stock Up, where it's sorcery speed, 3 mana, look at 5 cards, put 2 in hand, versus the cards like Nissahall and Ristic Study and cards like that are drawing their cards on the turn cycle, where cards like Stock Up can help you try and win the game now, these cards are kind of like setup cards that are hoping you to win the game on a later turn. So I do think if you're running too many engines and don't have a balance, I think that you will run into issues where you're playing your Ristic Study or your Nessa Hall or whatever it is and just say go. And in some cases that will be enough, especially if you have a Mana Vault or something out that can get this out as early as possible. But then there's all the other games where I just don't think it does any work at all. It's stuck in hand. That was a little bit of the cards that we don't see at our table that are maybe good enough. Of course, this list could go on forever. We have a lot of cards on this list, but this one was the most interesting one for us to talk about. But if you have some funny ones you think fits on this list, we would love to hear about them in the comments. Just as a little follow-up to this category, we could just quickly talk about a few cards that are played at our table that we do see that maybe aren't good enough, that we are still just playing maybe because of old habits or otherwise. And on that list, for me at least, I have Punkify and Rapid Hybridization. And the reason I have these two on my list is, as I said earlier, I actually have two mono blue decks. And in both cases, they were on the list when I built the deck. And as of now, none of them is in none of the decks. I do think that the price is just too high, to be honest, because blue doesn't have a big board presence. Giving a free in those kind of decks actually end up mattering. You usually say it's a free, it doesn't matter that much, and it doesn't most of the time. But if you're in more colors, I still think these are the better options, because if you're in black, you're running all the good cards that cost 1 mana there first. You're running your Deadly Relics, you're running your Cast Down and your Dismember and stuff like that. So I don't think, if you're not running them in mono blue, where are you running them is my question.
At this point, even the bounce spells to 1 mana is probably better, because our meta is so fast, so bouncing it is kind of the same as removing it. So why give them an upside?
A card we are going to talk about a little bit in the next category is a card I've begun to put into my decks instead of Punkify and Rapid, and that is Suspend. Because we are on this clock in bracket 4, Suspend does all of the same work. There's Punkify and Rapid. Does just better, I think, because first of all, you're not giving them anything. It's a 1 mana instant like the others. And by the time we get round to it being relevant, the game is either over or you lost anyway, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's not good enough anymore to give people 3-3, even though it doesn't sound like a bad thing. But bouncing or anything else is pretty much better at this point. Gives them less options.
One of my blue decks is, of course, Katara, Waterbending Master, and since I want to be attacking with that creature, giving my opponents a free is very relevant. Of course, I have cards in my deck, like Wander, that gives my commander evasive capabilities, but still by then, having a free keeps hitting me in the face, because that's what people does when you're drawing 20 cards. Can end up mattering, so I'm not running them.
I can remember playing them as well in my copy decks, especially on copy decks. Kind of the same issue. If you copy it 2 times, you give 9 power away, and they have a tendency to hit you in the face. So suddenly, it's pretty rough. Probably not good enough anymore.
Yeah, it's not so much as a life total issue as an application issue, I think. But of course, the life will also end up mattering, and we talked about this a lot. Also, when we're talking about the One Ring, that life total just seemed to matter more and more in recent days. So of course, being hit in the face by free for 3 turns and losing 25% of your life is still something.
A quick one I wanted to mention. I think it is Mana Drain.
Yeah, and I could imagine that someone thought we would mention this on our stable list.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think it's a mono blue stable. If you're playing it or not is one thing, but I do think it's a mono blue stable.
Yeah, I haven't taken it out of my deck, so I just wanted to mention that I have been thinking about it lately, and I think others have, because we haven't seen it that much anymore, I think. Maybe it's just been luck of the draw that we haven't seen it. Yeah, I think the closer we move to instant speed and sorcery, instant to sorcery being the thing to counter, the worse mana drain will be. I think it's still good enough so far, because we still see a lot of creatures.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been thinking about it.
I remember I had begun to take it out of several decks before the Mana Crypt ban, and post Mana Crypt ban, it went back into a lot of those decks. My Muldrotha was one of them, where you do have the 3 generic casts when you're casting Muldrotha, and Mana Drain helps with you boosting out Muldrotha for the next turn. and maybe even cast Displacer Kitten or something like that. So I still think it does a lot of work. Of course, I'm using this in my Emery deck as well because it's an artifact deck, and I love the generic mana. I still play it in a lot of decks, but I will say that it's not good enough to be played in all blue decks. I'm not running this in my Helga. I would much rather have a Swan Song, Mental Misstep, or Flusterstorm or something like that than Mana Drain, because Mana Drain is still 2 mana, and that matters a lot when you're trying to protect your win con.
Yeah, definitely. And 2 blue is relevant as well.
And 2 blue is also an important one. Well, this was just a few cards. We would just quickly like to mention that we still see at our table that we don't think are necessarily good enough anymore, and I think it's important just to keep questioning the cards you have in your deck, and especially the staples, because as we have this power creep, like into the flood more, we just have to question the cards that we're keeping in our decks. We keep questioning if they're good enough. At some point, people were still playing Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, and some still do, but it's just not cards we're seeing at our table anymore. But maybe our favorite category, Jacob, pet cards. We still have a lot of pet cards in Magic in general. Well, you don't, as you said the last time. You just tend to be playing boring Magic and all the good cards. But I could imagine that, especially in blue, if you had any pet cards, it would be in this color.
Yeah, definitely. In this color, by there was actually some choices. But my top one is definitely Steel Enchantment. I have played this for years, and I really love it. And like the boring reason is it's another Ristic study. Even better, it's still another person's Ristic study. And as the years has gone by now, there is more and more powerful enchantment. So Smothering Tide and all this. So I really love that card. I wish that the Steel Artifact card, which also exists, I wish that was 2 mana as well. Sadly, it's 4 mana.
Yeah, and we even see Steel Enchantment in CDH now. And I know you talked about this way before they started playing it in CDH. So, and in the same breath, we can just quickly talk about Mirror Maid that we also mentioned earlier. That does a lot of the same thing. This one is not stealing, of course. It's copying, but it also has the option of just being a Soul Ring or One Ring or whatever you want to have it as.
Mirror Maid is on my list of buy like 15 of those and put them in all my blue decks because it has just overperformed every time I see it. So I want more of that.
In the beginning, I was like, what am I taking out? Because I sort of saw it as a utility card. But now I'm just putting it in as card draw. I have my card drawing column and I put Mirror Maid there. And that's just the slot it fills. So if it ends up being a Soul Ring, I just have one less mana card draw in my deck. But that's the slot it's taking. If I'm running 12 card draw spells, then this is just one of them.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is if you copy a Soul Ring with it, it's probably because you don't need the card draw. It kind of helps with that as well, that you don't flood with card draw abilities.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. I know that you have some more pet cards than I do, so
yeah,
take it away.
Yeah, you will never hear me stop talking about these ones, especially the first one, Wash Away and Strix Serenade. Wash Away has pretty much been a staple for me since it got printed. When I say pretty much, it has been a staple for me since it got printed. I run it in all my blue decks. This is, when we talk about Punkify and Rapid Hybridization, I think this is one of the cards that have replaced those for me. 1 mana, and not only does it counter your commander, but if it has an Enters ability, like your Evelyn deck or your Etali deck or one of the many other decks that comes with an Enters ability, you're not only countering their commander, but they're not getting the triggered ability as well. And I do think that's a big thing. So much of a big thing that I'm actually also hit the point where I'm running Strix Serenade in all of my decks. That I didn't do that to begin with, but with the inclusion of the One Ring into the format, I do think that Strix Serenade has become more important. So I run both in all of my blue decks, and there has to be some sort of power creep or something like that for me to take them out. I think they're best in class, and I think they do so much work. Maybe to a point where I would call them staples. Like I said, they're staples for me.
Yeah, I hate getting them cast on my thing, so that's maybe a statement for them being good. I'm not sure. I have a hate-hate relationship. Hate getting cast on me, and I don't like to cast them as well. So I will say Strix Serenade is close with me. I really thought about playing that card, but I haven't so far.
Strix Serenade is in some way more relevant, meaning it's creatures in general, so you can counter Drannith Magistrate or whatever you like, and then it also hits the One Ring,
artifacts, which is the big one for me.
Yeah, and in some rare cases it hits a Chromatic Ori. We do see that card sometimes, or Boulder Citadel.
We do. Yeah, I think if Boulder Citadel was a lot more in our meta, I would probably think about this a lot more, because I think you could be in a play group where Boulder Citadel was like the number one win condition. It just isn't in our pot, so it's interesting. I think Strix Serenade is so close. I think the cards are good. I just don't like them. So
yeah, Strix Serenade also hit Consecrated Sphinx, and we talked about this earlier regarding all the best counter spells. It's non-creature spells, and casting Into the Flood more or Gilded Drake might be a solution for this. But then there's just all the creatures where there's a triggered ability with the creature that has been cast, where it's too little too late. I mean, when Italia has hit the battlefield, it's too late if you remove it or not. So I what I love about this, besides the obvious reasons, is the flexibility they provide alongside with the Gilded Drake and the Into the Flood more and the counter spells. It's sort of have this balance between you're ready for anything. Of course, you now need to have them in hand for the right time, but that's magic for you.
Yeah, I think it's the protection part that they don't protect your win con. That's the thing I don't like. I know that Wash Away can do that and stuff, but
yeah, and I will say I have actually cast Washed Away more than one time for the cleave ability, so it's not irrelevant. And like you said before, in this Guy's Cradle meta where we have lots and lots of mana, that's usually one of the ways we are winning the games. Spending free mana to its cleave ability is usually very easy to do.
Yeah. This is also one you have put on the list, but I actually kind of like it as well. It's Retrace. Pretty simple card, but pretty effective in low color. So it's basically one of the only ways for mono blue to add additional fast mana early on the game. So 1 mana, ramp an island into play, which is pretty cool. Not much to say about it, but it's good. I think if you play mono blue, probably play it. Especially if you're a high tide deck, then even better. But yeah, good card, 1 mana, ramp, hard to find in blue.
It's a one-time use exploration of sorts.
Yeah.
So yeah, playing this, having an extra island in hand and putting that onto the battlefield turn 1 always feels great.
It does.
Not lots to talk about. It's a mono blue ram spell, so I think you play this in all your mono blue decks, and maybe also in Dimir and Izzet, I would imagine.
You could, yeah.
And yeah, I have put Suspend on this list over pet cards. Like I said earlier, this has replaced pretty much in all my decks the Punkifies and the Rapid Hybridization. I think it's beyond good enough, but I do also think it's sort of a bracket 4, bracket 5 card, because the timing itself is what makes it good. So if you have these games that goes on forever, it does nothing, and then I don't think it's good enough. But in our case, I think it's just good enough to be playing instead.
Yeah, if I should quickly note about it, I haven't actually played it, but I just looked it up when you talked about it before, and it seems like being pretty good. I like Delay counterspell, and that's even 2 mana, so I think that's pretty good, and a lot better than Punkify and Rapid, I think, at this point in our pot. So a good find.
Got them home a couple of weeks ago, so I've been putting them in all of my decks.
Yeah. Next up, it's a card that you have been playing recently, and I actually been kind of impressed with it. So it's Sacred Meditation. So yeah, pseudo drawing a card when it enters, and even kind of the best card, if you can say that, a card you had already used, and if you used it, it was probably pretty decent. So that's like the one part of it, and it's below rate mana cost wise, getting a card instant or sorcery back from a graveyard. So that's pretty strong. On top of that, it has the whole draw discard effect. And actually last week I ended up copying your Chakra Meditation just to get that part of it, because I wanted to filter my cards. So card filtering on top of the other thing. So it seems pretty pushed, to say the least.
Yeah, you played a clever impersonator, I think it was, and made a copy of my Chakra Meditation, and you got your Jessica's Will back from the graveyard, if I remember correctly. And it's one of those cards where originally I put it into my Green Goblin deck, and then reading it, it was just like, it just seems like it's a good card if you're playing a lot of instants and sorceries. So I also put it into my Katara Waterbending Master deck. So I think if you're running 30 plus instant and sorceries, that this is just a stable, close to a stable, I would say. I mean, Eternal Witness is already a stable in green, and that's 3 mana, and that comes without the drawing discarding. I know it can get any card back, and this is only instant and sorceries, but I mean, since you're putting it into deck where you have to cast instant and sorceries, I would imagine that's what your graveyard is filled with. Casting this, getting your Fierce Guardianship back, or in your case last week, getting a Jeska's Will back, it does so much work.
Yeah, definitely. I will probably try it out in Sir, just because you can shoot it with Sir as well. And you can, I don't Sir when you take over the game later in the game. I have a tendency to flood my hand with lands and other useless stuff. So it'd be nice to like remove those cards and actually just have pure gas in the hand. So it also helps with that.
I can't remember your deck list for that deck, but you of course need to have enough instant and sorceries. I know you run a lot of counter spells, so it's probably good enough just for that.
Yeah, I think I have 18 counter spells, so around 24, I think, instant and sorceries. So a bit low, but I think it's good enough.
Last on the list is also a newly included card for me, at least. It's not in all my blue decks, but I'm considering to put it in all my blue decks, and that's Consult the Star Charts. And yeah, it's just, I think it falls into the same category as you said earlier. It's one of those vegetable cards where eat your vegetables. It's one of those cards where if you have enough mana, you can even cast it on your own turn and trying to win. I love having a few of those cards in my deck where I can draw cards on my own turn and not just my opponent's turn. So Consult the Star Charts in this case does it for me. And yeah, I just think it's a very good card. I think it's close to being best in class for what it does. We can compare it to cards like Stock Up and Thick Fruit Time, I think. And you can just cast this much easier. It's instant speed, it's 2 mana, and you can also kick it if you have the mana for it. But early game, even searching for that extra land, maybe only looking at 2 cards, putting a land in hand is fine by me. It's like you said with the extra turn spells earlier. Early game it does one thing, and late game it does another. And I think you can cast this at any time during the game, and you would be happy with the result. So I like those sorts of flexible cards.
Yeah, I think this is one of the cards where I need to try it. I play a lot of land decks, so it seems pretty good there, where I have a lot of mana. I just haven't gotten around to it. I'm pretty sure it will perform well in those decks, and yeah, remove some of the other card draw for that effect. I think it's good. I will play it more.
Yeah, that was all we had from the color blue. Like we said, it is blue, and we could talk about blue to our face god, very same color. There's so many cards. We can, of course, not cover all the cards, especially in blue, into one episode. So this was our try to do just so. And we would be more than happy to hear all the inclusions you guys have. Share them with us in the comments. We love playing this color, of course. So any pet cards or whatever you have that you think fits on this list, let us know. Any closing thoughts, Jacob, regarding blue?
No, I'll keep it at that. I think we have said enough. And yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. And good luck to Brian, our editor, to edit this one. That's a long one.
It's a long one, yeah. Yeah. And as always, join our Discord server. Come talk blue with us or any other kind of magic. We just love to talk magic, and we will be waiting for you on our Discord servers. But until then, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for watching.